we have an interview in studio, and joining us today is Mr. Ezekiel Kemboi. Thank you very much for joining us. Ezekiel Mutua, I beg your pardon. Thank you very much for joining us. He is the CEO of the Kenya Film and Classification Board. Of course, you have been making the news this week, making headlines, because the Kenya Film Classification Board agreed to the gazettement of controversial rules put together by the Communications Authority, and these touched mostly on sex talk on radio and TV programs that have sex and nudity and issues basically to do with adults. And so these have been banned between 5 a.m. and 10 p.m. And we also touched on advertising and televangelists. So many of these laws and issues are very good intentions, but a lot of these things seem to be gray or borderline with no clear legislation. So what is your plan for implementation?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, the regulations were published by the Communications Authority of Kenya. I work for the Kenya Film Classification Board. However, the implementation of the same touches on my organization. If you read them, a lot of reference is meant to the Kenya Film Classification Board, especially in respect to film and broadcast content, because we are the ones who provide Communications Authority of Kenya with evidence of violation or non-compliance with the regulations. So we come in, and they're a product of wide consultations. Media owners were consulted, journalists were consulted. We presented our memorandum also as the Kenya Film Classification Board, and therefore this is a product of consultations. Going forward in terms of implementation, as you have seen from the regulations themselves, there's a window of 6 months within which people should put their house in order, ensure that they're able to comply with the watershed period, ensure that they are able to organize themselves to comply with these regulations. But allow me to just point out that these are regulations. They are not the law, they are not above the law, and they are not above the constitution. Regulations speak to the main law that governs a sector. And in this case, it is the Kenya Information and Communications Act, amended in 2013, and also the Film and Stage Plays Act, which forms my board. And there are issues overlap of mandates of various government agencies. These regulations are not, like I've said, are not above the law, and they're not above the constitution. The constitution is the supreme law of the land. It governs the way we relate with each other. That's why we went to the referendum and we voted and we passed it. So any regulation or any law that would be inconsistent with the constitution, it would be null and void. So the hula baloo and the uproar that people have raised about the regulations is actually misplaced, because you are saying then the constitution is wrong, unless you don't believe in the constitution. Because if there is anything in these regulations that is not in keeping or in tandem or does not speak to the letter and spirit of the constitution, it's null and void. You can go to court and challenge it, not even as a church organization or as media, even as an individual citizen. So unless people come up and understand, read and understand their rights, that their rights are protected in the constitution, and not even parliament can enact a law that contravenes or contradicts the spirit of the constitution. And if there is any inconsistency between these regulations and the law in respect to what the constitution says, then the constitution carries the day. So my worry is we could probably be commending out of the hangovers of the dictatorial experiences that we have gone through, and we probably think that government can still come in and bring a law that is not, that's against the constitution. That the government can come in and rein in the media or the church. There is nothing like that.
So let's speak about this hula baloo you're referring to. Mostly it's because many of these things are not quite clear to the people. When you talk about sex talk on radio and television, what entails sex talk? Is sex education, educating the masses about contraception and whatnot, is that referred to as sex talk? Should that be between, banned between 5 a.m. and 10 p.m.
Not quite, not quite. We are talking about extreme adult content within the watershed. First of all, the discussions are content that is coming within the watershed period, which in Kenya is between 5 in the morning and 10 in the evening. And the idea is to ensure that programs that are meant for adult audience are not accessed by children. So
okay.
You don't bring them at a time when there is a likelihood of children listening. Again, is to ensure that programs that come during the day, they are suitable for family viewing and listening, so that we do not corrupt the moral values of this country. We've had a lot of adult talk during the day, a lot of sex talk. Sex talk can be brought for educational purposes, but it not include the kind of fantasies and the kind of useless discussions that sometimes go on during the day. If there are discussions that are aiming at adults in terms of how they relate in the bedroom and so on, those are discussions that should be taken to past 10 in the evening. And these are not just models for Kenya. These are models world over to protect moral values and ensure that you do not expose children to information that is not suitable for them.
Right. Right. Now, media houses are up in arms because the advertisements were also scaled down to 14 adverts per hour of broadcasting. And, you know, advertising is, you know, solely what media houses depend on for revenue. So what informed this decision, if you can answer that, what informed the decision to scale down adverts by 14%? And how will you stop media houses from suffering an economic setback from that?
I think the ratio has been discussed, and it can seal the debate. Look, these regulations are not final. These are just proposals by the Communications Authority of Kenya to regulate the sector. Like I said, we have a law and we have the constitution. These discussions are they're based on models, how they operate in other countries. They are based on consultations with the mainstream media institutions, including the Advertising Practitioners Association. And everybody gave their input. If there's anything wrong in them, we can still correct them. Discussions can still go on. But in terms of the ratio of 7 minutes in 30, 7 in 30 minutes as segment, I think that's a lot of time for adverts. An advert of 1 minute communicates a lot. So first of all, it's not to undermine anything. It's just to ensure that if it's a news channel and it is you have brought news at that particular hour, then you don't keep interrupting or bringing advertisements for products and end up not performing the very cardinal role of the media, which is to inform, educate, and entertain. And I think when it comes to news, then just concentrate on it and reasonably bring 7 minutes. I think 7 out of 30, you have 21 minutes of news, and that is sufficient. And in any case, we are only talking about within the news segment. You have the whole day. But like I keep saying, you use it to play nude video music and Niger movies and other programs that do not add value. Play your adverts there. Find a creative way of ensuring that you have catchy programs where advertising also can ride on. So I think it's a question of debate, it's a question of discussion. And look, Michelle, when you are making a law, you balance the interest of very many other sectors. It's not just the media. The media do not exist for themselves. You exist for the society. And the frequencies that you hold are not your own. National frequencies are national assets. You hold them in trust for the public. So there are also regulations that govern how you're going to use them on behalf of the public. You cannot just be allowed to over-commercialize so that news becomes just commercial or advertising time. I think you can have then an advertising channel, and there are opportunities for that.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about local content now, because this was also mentioned in these new regulations. There are debates to increase local content from 40% to 60% now. But as it is, the industry is still struggling to attain the 40% local content within the media houses. So what is the plan to extend this to 60%?
There is no shortage of local content. The media houses just don't want to assist local production and ensure that youngsters in this country, the youth of this country, and the creative industry in this country is supported to grow. When you play Niger movies from morning to evening, Mexican soaps, and all this foreign content, you are actually undermining the creative industries in this country. There is a lot of local content rotting in the shelves of our local producers, and they don't know where to go. And some of them are coming to office and asking, then what is the point? What is the point of the government encouraging creativity and encouraging us to produce this content if media houses are not going to use them? In fact, the debate has even moved to whether broadcasters should also be allowed to be content producers, because there should be a clear line where you allow people who are producing content, people who have invested in this area, to have channels. And these channels can only be the national resources and the national broadcasting stations that, like I said, we have licensed to hold them in trust for the public. So the idea is to promote creativity. We have a lot of talented youth, very educated, very knowledgeable. Some of the stars that we have, they would have had no chance, you know, to expose their talent if we were only playing Niger movies. And I think there is also a sense in which you are diluting our culture and adulterating the moral values of this country by bringing foreign content that does not necessarily conform to our culture. We would prefer to have content that is produced here, that is encouraging our culture, that conforms to our behavior and our values, and that is better. But then, since we're a global village, you balance it. And we're only asking for 40% at least. I wish we had gone to the other extreme of 60%. And these ones we have said you implement progressively so that you ensure that you promote local creativity.
Good. And I'm glad you mentioned the issue of culture, because there is a debate again over what it means for to have local content and air, because we do have local producers and local content producers who take a foreign program and translate it into Swahili and pass it over as a local channel, as a local program. Yeah,
I've seen that in some of the areas. Remember, when we talk about local content, we are talking about productions done in this country. And I think we want to ask ourselves the question, have you, those of you who have traveled maybe to Nigeria, we play a lot of Niger movies here. Have you ever seen a Kenyan movie in the mainstream news or prime news or prime channels, mainstream media of Nigeria or in India or in the US for that matter? Why don't we have a balance where we are proud of our own and we promote our own? Why do we ape to these foreign ideologies and foreign culture? I think some of it is because of the cost. And I think the media must understand that while we are supporting, and this industry must be supported, it creates employment, it's very important, then media does not exist just for commercial or profit motive. There is the balance of national interest. You are expected to promote public interest. And in fact, in certain jurisdictions, during news, you are even, media is compelled to spend some time for information that is related to public interest, like information on health, education, and so on. I think here we are very lenient in terms of the latitude that we have given to the media. I think we need to streamline the industry. We are still a nascent democracy. We are growing. Some of these things should not scare people. If proposals have been given or regulations have been brought forward, I think we create a debate, and I'm very happy that you're doing that.
Right, absolutely. Now, I did speak to a few members of the Kenya Editors Guild over the past week, and what they're mentioning is that when it comes to local content, it's expensive. It's expensive to produce content locally. So what the Kenya Film Classification Board and the Communications Authority is doing is like the government saying, let's have free education, but having no subsidies of its own. So what many media houses and many members of the journalism community are saying is local content can be produced in the country, yes, but there needs to be something to help media houses. There needs to be incentives for them. There needs to be some sort of subsidies in the term of production cost. Is that anywhere in the plans?
I agree, absolutely, and that's where the debate should be, to see how we can incentivize and reward local productions. If you look at the budget of 2014-2015, the Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury announced tax rebates on film production, both for international and local filmmakers. And the idea is to encourage, to incentivize filmmakers to ensure that we do not lose business to other destinations like South Africa. The idea is to promote Kenya as a preferred filming destination. And I think there is a lot of effort within the government to ensure that we do not make the fees that we charge prohibitive. If you saw this week, the Kenya Film Classification Board took over the functions of licensing and registering film engines in this country. And we actually announced the fees. If you look at them, 5,000, 12,000 for shooting a movie in Nairobi, 1,000 per day. If you look at the other countries, it's very expensive. And we are trying to balance. We want to bring the fees down as much as possible to ensure that we promote the thriving industry and tap into the possibilities of this country, because this country is one of the best filming destinations in the world.
And you mentioned that, you know, the rates that you've put are quite lower as compared to other countries that pay much higher. Then will the question of quality be compromised?
Not quite. I mean, if you look at the quality that is coming from out of this country, it is pretty, it can compare with any other quality anywhere in the world. But you see there's also the experience of the people operating the Riverwood group, Ensemble group, who are coming up with, low-cost productions, short movies that are very cost-friendly, but they are being consumed, and they are becoming one of the major content producers. We are now being targeted because of the great work that Monique Mageri and group are doing with the Riverwood Ensemble.
Right.
And I think that's what we need to encourage, that become creative, that we are not short of creativity. If you look at the talents that we have, I think we are not likely to compromise quality, because what is local content about? It's not just about entertainment. It's about education. It's about information. And I think there's a variety of content that is coming from our producers that is fit for the different segments and the different needs of the Kenyan audience.
Okay. Now, real quick, let's talk about televangelists.
Yes.
Of course, these new regulations have also hit televangelists.
The controversial one.
And they are up in arms saying they will not take this lying down, because you've taken away the chance for them to have someone's on air. And
first of all, not me. But
the Communications Authority, the regulations have taken away the chance for them to do that. How can they, go around this? Because they're saying, many of the televangelists are saying the Communications Authority needs to go after the individual people who are accused of soliciting or asking for money from the people they're preaching to.
Absolutely. Michelle, for the avoidance of doubt, because I've been on record about this issue, first of all, the guidelines are published by the Communications Authority of Kenya. Okay? I'm a born-again Christian myself. I support the church. I am a believer in the spreading of the gospel, and I believe the church as an institution has a very important role in society. In fact, the church or religious organizations are the greatest partner of the government, and this government would be the last thing it would want to do is to undermine the freedom of worship or even the freedom of the media. And I think we need to be clear that there could be reasonable fear because of where we are coming from or experiences from other countries. But as far as these regulations are concerned, they are meant to tame the rogue characters in the church. And we have seen a lot of things that are really not good. If there are sections of this society that have been infiltrated by quacks and charlatans, and people spoil the good name of the church. It's the church, it's the religious institutions, particularly the evangelical sector, if we were to be honest, and the media. There are more quacks in the media and in the church than even in medicine. And I think a time has come for us to reflect on these very important institutions, because people believe the church and people believe the media. You cannot allow crucial institutions like those two to have anything called a free fall, where any manner of character can come in. In fact, by so doing, then the government will be allowing a situation where the good preachers, the men of integrity in the church, people leave the talk, and people are committed to the cause of the gospel and the cause of their religious calling, then we'll have no name. The integrity will be compromised because of characters who are playing drama, who are pandering to emotions, and who have brought comedy to the church. They are nothing but comedians. They are not equipping themselves with knowledge. They have no understanding of current issues, but they pander to the, I think, desperations of Kenyans because of many reasons, and they want to mislead them and lure them into faith that is not even in keeping with the Bible.
Right.
I think the ones of integrity, the real preachers and the real church, there is nothing to fear. Because what these things say, these regulations say, and I want to correct something about Otako and sowing of the seed. First of all, that information that was given is misleading, because I have the document here, and I want people to download. It's accessible in the Communications Authority of Kenya website. You can go to the Kenya Law reports and download. I feel a bit disappointed when I engage with pastors and clergy, even some of my friends, and they have not read. The best thing for you, the best defense of issues like this is first of all to read. Churches are rich, they can even get lawyers to interpret this. And then number two, let them not confuse these regulations with what the Attorney General is doing. There's another development that is going on with the Attorney General that is talking about registration of churches, who becomes a pastor. That's a different process. It is ongoing, and the church can give their proposal. If the agent does not engage them and they feel they have something to complain about, they can even go to Parliament and stop it before it becomes law. They can even challenge it in court and it will be nullified. What we are talking about here regarding Otacom, it says you shall not force people. In fact, do you have time, Michelle? Can I read just
unfortunately, we don't have much time on our hands,
but it
what
just
I want you
says
to clear up
not to
is,
force. It speaks about force, use of force. Now, somebody asked me, how do you force people to get saved on TV? And I will say then, if I can't understand it, then I'm not likely to commit that kind of crime. But I can tell you, this world is not short of conmen and shenanigans. And there are people who even use scaring methods. They tell you, if you don't get saved, you know, you'll burn in hell, or your family, or this and that will happen to you. They speak doom to you. And I think that can be used as evidence that you're using force.
Right.
I think if you go to TV...
I want you to clear up one thing for us, you know, as we wind up. Time is not on our side. So is televangelism being done away with completely, or are there pastors that can be on TV, and what is the criteria for that? What should
But
they
this
not
thing is
do?
for the people on TV and broadcast. These regulations are actually a recognition that televangelism is a critical sector, that using broadcast stations to propagate the gospel is a crucial thing. They are only meant to promote interreligious tolerance, so that you don't go on TV and attack another church or attack another faith. And I think there's nothing wrong. In fact, the churches are not complaining about that. They are complaining about the use of the word proselytization, which in the interpretation here, because to understand what it means in the document, you have to go to the definition. In the definition, it means the use of force to evangelize, or the use of force for someone to convert somebody. But if you persuade, if you use the knowledge of the word, the Quran, the Bible, and persuade people, and you call them to get saved, Otako is not forbidden here, but it says use of force. Now, how that can be used, like I've said, it could be an extreme case, but it's meant to tame those extreme cases where they might occur.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. That is Ezekiel Mutua, the CEO of the Kenya Film Classification Board, speaking to us about those new rules that were put down by the Communications Authority.